Welcome once again to the South Dakota Wildfire Potential Briefing. It is July, well, of course I have the wrong date in here. It's July 22nd today, 2021. I'm Darren Clavel, the State Fire Meteorologist for South Dakota and Research Scientist at South Dakota Mines. We'll start this off by just looking at a little bit of where we are with respect to our current climate conditions, and then we will look at fuels and fire conditions from three of our interagency fire managers, and then I'll close things off with the wildfire potential outlook as we go through the next 1 to 3 weeks. So where we sit right now, over the past couple of weeks, y'all have probably noticed it's been relatively cooler than, say, the entire month of June was. We kind of had this very active pattern with a lot of shortwave troughs coming through, and it really led to near average temperatures across the state. Southeastern South Dakota was much cooler than average, 2 to 4 degrees cooler than average. Western and northern South Dakota were relatively warmer. If we look at precipitation during that same period, it was kind of a smattering of precipitation across the state. Really, north central South Dakota remained incredibly dry. This is percent of normal precipitation on your screen. The warmer colors are dry conditions. The cooler colors are wetter than average conditions. So again, north central South Dakota saw a lot of dry conditions persisting, while the rest of the state did see those hit or miss thunderstorm showers. That combined with the cooler temperatures kind of reduced the overall fire potential, but it does look like we're going into a different kind of weather pattern for at least the next 10 days. And if we really focus in, southeastern South Dakota, the Sioux Falls area got a lot of precip. There were areas in the Black Hills that did get some decent precipitation as well, but it was more or less hit or miss, kind of like it usually is in the Black Hills. But at least some beneficial precipitation for the folks that managed to get it. And the combination of the near average temperatures and, depending on where you were, you got some precipitation. That led to kind of average evaporative demand across the state. This figure here is the EDI categories, or the evaporative demand drought index. Now, this index has a 5-day lag to it just due to the way it's calculated. And so, today's the 22nd. The 5-day lag shows us the 2-week EDI categories from July 17th. So going back 2 weeks prior to July 17th, really, there wasn't a lot of evaporative demand on the soils, on the plants, on the landscape. This was a good thing. This kind of prevented us from getting farther and farther into the deep rabbit hole that is drought across the state. However, the vegetation conditions haven't really benefited from that reduced evaporative demand. Now, this is the VEG-DRY, or the Vegetation Drought Response Index from last month, June 20th. And you can see that the drought conditions across the state are basically just drought stressed, right? Everything a month ago was very, very drought stressed. June was such a warm month. But then even the cooler conditions that we saw to start the beginning of this month over the past couple of weeks, conditions still degraded further. Our VEG-DRY index today looks like this. And I'll toggle kind of back and forth between the two. And if we look at our VEG-DRY index today, you can see that we're in much worse shape than where we were last month. Now, this is likely due to the conditions in which the grasses were growing across the state. And I do have to interject, please, if you do not have your microphone muted, please mute your microphone. I can hear some noise in the background. So please mute your microphone if you don't have it muted. Our current Vegetation Drought Response Index shows more severe drought-stressed vegetation across the state. We're thinking, and this is some discussions I've had with our state climatologist and some other folks across the state and the region, is that April and May were really cooler than average across the state. So this delayed green up. But once June hit, June was so incredibly hot and dry. We were, I believe, the warmest June on record for South Dakota and the 4th driest June on record for South Dakota, that once the vegetation did emerge, it didn't really have enough time to do anything in its life cycle. And then it got heat stressed and it died off. And so our VEG-DRY, I think, is showing that the vegetation just had a really hard time growing this year because of kind of this wonky time period that it was able to grow in. And so conditions across the state are pretty dire. And then the most severe across kind of northeastern, going up towards north central South Dakota, and then a lot of northwestern South Dakota. Interestingly enough, if you look at the Black Hills, there are a few green pixels in there. The Black Hills, by and large, are looking pretty decent. in terms of the herbaceous growth. There's been enough precipitation there where the plants haven't necessarily been as stressed as they are across the rest of the state. We got a lot of soil moisture anomalies across the state. So our soils, as of yesterday, are much, much drier than average statewide. We don't have any moisture in the bank that will help the plants over the next couple of weeks when we expect the really hot temperatures to kick in. So this is our USDM, or the United States Drought Monitor, from a month ago. If we compare that to where we are today, we do have some improvements in northeastern South Dakota, kind of the eastern Prairie Coteau region, but we do have a lot of degradations, the introduction of D3 across kind of central and east central South Dakota. The Black Hills, not much has changed. Still kind of the hole in the United States Drought Monitor over the Black Hills, again, with the precipitation that those areas have been getting. To date, Custer, for example, is relatively average. Nearly all the other weather stations across the state of South Dakota reporting below average precipitation year to date. And this leads us to our fuels conditions. Now, this is a region-wide image, but of course we can see South Dakota up here. And this is from our observations yesterday. And if you look at the energy release component, or basically a metric of fuel dryness, if you will, you can see that nearly all the stations across the state are at or above their 50th percentiles, except for these two stations in the eastern Black Hills. These were the stations that got the precipitation over the past, say, 72 hours. And so they're a little bit wetter. But if we look at the northern hills, if we look at Nemo up here, we're above the 80th percentile. And if you go even farther up north towards the Shade Hill Reservoir, 97th percentile or above, it's actually producing record high ERC values for the date today. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to kick it over to John Haskvitz. John, if you would share your screen, we can hear from you from a state perspective.
All right, yeah, I don't got much to share with you as far as images or anything like that, but so just starting up kind of in the, well, for you guys who don't know me, John Haskvitz, Fire Management Officer for the Custer District Office here. Kind of just starting up in the Northern Hills, talking with their other counterparts up there in the Northern Hills. Not a lot of concern in the hills at this time. They are taking, like Darren just mentioned, they did get a little bit of rain up there. So not a whole lot of concern in the timber. Their ERCs are reading in those 50s though. So they're sitting pretty high for their ERCs as far as their raw stations, their spearfish. Their concern up there is more the prairie. The grasses are starting to cure out up there. They got kind of a tinge green still to them, but they are seeing grass fires and nothing significant, but that is kind of one of their concerns up there. Moving into the central hills, not a lot of concern again in the timber. If they do get starts, they're staying very small, 10th acre, nothing real concerning there in the timber wise. And then there's a slight concern out into that Pennington County, Meade County area. They're starting to see their grass fires, human caused ones, but they are seeing some growth on them. 50 acres, 100 acres a couple days ago. And their raw station sitting there, they're reading average or slightly above, it seems. So not a lot of concern there for the timber, I guess. And then down here in the Southern Hills, we just did get a couple lightning starts the other day. A couple of them stayed at a 10th acre. One did get to half acre, kind of seemed like it burned more than needle cast. And then the grass was kind of putting it out. It kind of seemed like one of the parks that actually got to half acre, that it didn't really grow much. Obviously, it stayed a half acre, but it did get into that red needle slash, which was burning. So if that would have had some wind on it, probably would have been a little more concern for us, but still nothing too scary. Eastern Custer County, they're staying, there's nothing really going on out there except for the other day they did have, one lightning start, 70 acre grass fire, did have some wind on it, kind of pushed it a little bit. But other than that, it's pretty quiet out there as well. Speaking statewide now, we did see that in Hawken County, they did have that 1,000 acre grass fire. Reports of there wasn't a whole lot of wind on that. So I don't know if that was just due to terrain or what the factors were there on the growth. Another one of our big concerns statewide is going to be the river breaks area with the drought down in the river breaks. July 3rd, they did see timber fire. Started in a state park down by Pickstown. It actually nuked all their timber, burnt all the shelter belts. So they did have some fire activity down in their 150-acre fire. Other than that, I guess it's just going to be statewide in the prairies right now. And if we don't get rain out there, it's just fires are going to start getting bigger. So that's kind of our overall concern for the state for us. So that's end of report for me.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Jason, can we hear from Black Hills National Forest?
All right, you've got screen share here. All right, is everybody seeing that?
We do, Jason, but if you could speak up just a touch, you're a little quiet.
All right. So again, Jason Birchie, Fire Staff Officer on the Black Hills. So I've got a few slides, and some of this is going to piggyback onto what Darren shared. This first slide, just wanted to do just a week comparison with ERCs. So looking to look at today's date, 7/22, and looking at last week. Slight uptick with ERC numbers. Get Nemo 34, Baker 33, below average, Custer 38 average, Rick Canyon 44 average, and then the Bear Lodge, as we've alluded to, is at 48, just below the 97th percentile. Then if you look at the bottom there, some of the work that our fuels folks have done with fuel samples. Bear Lodge looking at pine, and if you go straight across from the north end of the forest, the central part, fairly similar. It appears to be a little drier for white-tailed peat, and fairly similar samples with grass. And if you look at the 1,000 hours, varies from 14 to 35% at Baker Park. And then if you look at the bottom, June 24th, we have a 10% at Baker Park, and then June 19th, 8% up in Whitetail. So as we've alluded to, the precip we have received has definitely made a difference. And it's not exactly across the forest, but definitely a good share of the forest has received that precip and has benefited from it. I just wanted to take a look. Some of this was just my curiosity, looking at the drought monitor index. So I took a snapshot from the early 2000s when we had a number of large fires on the forest. So this first one goes back to August 22nd, 2000. If you look at South Dakota, you don't see any colors. And I guess the point I want to make is, with the Black Hills particularly, how resilient the forest is. We could get a good amount of moisture over the winter time, and then come spring, summer, things dry out, the fields are going to react. And of course, in 2000, we had a Jasper fire for 83,000 plus acres. If we take a look at 2001, again, South Dakota, you're not seeing any color. But then you can see it slowly making its way into Wyoming and other states. 2001, Roger Shack, Westville, the fires that we saw at the end of July. So 11,000, 10,000 plus. 2002, this is where we start to see the impact from the drought and started making the impact conditions here. Grizzly Gulch fire, 2002, 11,000 plus acres. And again, once you compound the drought on top of already dry conditions, we're susceptible to seeing large fire. And then 2003, Red Point, 17,000 plus. Again, it's that July, August, into September where we typically see that large fire. Again, not to say that we're not having issues right now, but I'm thinking it's something that all of us that are on this call need to be paying attention to. And as we know, if the tap shuts off, things start drying out. We're going to start seeing more active fire behavior, and it's going to start posing issues with resistance to control. And then last one is just kind of what you covered, Darren, and snapshot from the most recent drought monitor with the High Plains, 20 July. And again, we've got that drought hole right over Custer County. And then on the left, pretty close to a year ago, just a comparison, where we're at, where we're going. And again, that northeast corner of Wyoming, we've already seen and heard, you know, the number of fires on the fringe of the forest that have posed problems. And anytime they get start, it grows fairly quick. And again, that should be the expectation anytime we respond to any fires, you know, west of the state line. And then, you know, not that I have a crystal ball would be handy, but I think here, come August, we could be dealing with a different situation with fire activity local. So in essence, that's just what I wanted to share. I guess I'll open it up to you, Darren, or any questions.
Thanks, Jason. Brian Daunt wasn't able to join us today. Do you have any insight on Fort Pierre National Grasslands over Buffalo Gap?
You know, to be honest with you, Darren, I do not.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Jason. I really appreciate it. I need to see if Eric Allen from the Park Service was able to get through his issues, and it doesn't look like he is on. Eric, if you're on, can you give me a shout? I don't see him anywhere, so he must be having some issues. So I'll just go ahead and finish off with kind of our outlook in terms of what we're looking at for the rest of this month going into the month of August. And I need to find the correct screen to share. Here we go. So over the next couple of days, we are looking at some pretty decent shower and thunderstorm activity across the state. I shouldn't say decent, more isolated to scattered. As a matter of fact, we do have some thunderstorms forming over the northern Black Hills as we speak, and they are producing some lightning. But over the next 48 hours, this is kind of our total accumulated precipitation forecast. What I want to point out is that there are some areas that will receive anywhere from 1/2 inch to maybe 1 inch or even more of precipitation. It really just depends on where those thunderstorms are forming and where they're going. But I want to stress that this is not going to be a widespread precipitation event. We are going to see some lightning. All of that lightning is not necessarily going to come with rain. Some of it very well could come with rain, but just some kind of generic late July shower and thunderstorm activity over the next 48 hours. If we stretch this out a little bit further and look at our forecast over the next 7 days. Now, this is the forecast from the Weather Prediction Center, part of the National Weather Service. And by and large for South Dakota, they're showing, you know, anywhere from a trace all the way up to maybe 1/4 inch of precipitation in places. And so what the Weather Prediction Center is basically saying with this map is that some areas are going to get rain, but we're not really expecting widespread precipitation, right? It's going to be spotty, just kind of dependent upon wherever those thunderstorms go. So this is obviously concerning to me. The majority of the state is not going to get wetting rains over the next 7 days. Let me stress that. The majority of the state is not going to get wetting rains. But all of the state is going to get a lot of heat. Our 6 to 10 day forecast, really from now going through the first week in August, we are looking at some pretty extreme heat across South Dakota. So this is from the Climate Prediction Center. This is the 6 to 10 day forecast for temperature on the left and precipitation on the right. So this is for July 27th through the 31st. We have exceptionally high confidence and well above average temperatures across all of the northern and central Great Plains. That combined with the potential for below average precipitation during the same time period. Now I want to stress, if we look at the desert Southwest, the Four Corners region, we actually have a pretty robust southwest monsoon going on right now. Arizona's been receiving some flooding. That monsoon is expected to continue to push moisture up into kind of the Great Basin region and the western fringes of the Rocky Mountain region. What happens is you get a big upper level ridge that sets up over the US. It kicks up moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of California, the Pacific, and brings it to kind of the desert Southwest, the Four Corners region. But then that moisture tends to rotate up and over that ridge, and it does tend to come over South Dakota. But we don't have low-level moisture associated with it. All of this monsoonal moisture is basically mid-level moisture, or the middle layers of the troposphere. What this will do is it will give us thunderstorms that have very high cloud bases, which gives the opportunity for lightning, but the precipitation that comes from these types of thunderstorms, a lot of it will evaporate. And so when we have a robust southwest monsoon like we are going to have over the next couple of weeks, it typically gives us a better opportunity for dry lightning across our state, which is absolutely concerning when it comes to the fire potential for the next couple of weeks. Layer on top of this, if you look closely, this dark red conditions, we are looking at excessive heat from July 26th through July 28th across nearly all of South Dakota. The forecasts are showing, really starting Monday through Thursday of next week, forecasts are showing temperatures in excess of 100 degrees statewide. And in places, it could be well in excess of 100 degrees, from 105 to 112. There are some limiting caveats to that I'll get to towards the end of this presentation. If we stretch it out to the 8 to 14-day forecast, again, much of the same. Well above average temperatures are expected, but there's less confidence in our precipitation forecast because of that robust monsoonal moisture that we're expecting over kind of the Great Basin, Western Rocky Mountain region. And some of that moisture could get up into South Dakota, but history tells us that that's the type of the moisture that produces not a lot of widespread rainfall, but more issues with respect to lightning. And of course, our risk of hazardous temperatures, excessive heat. There's a moderate risk for that over eastern and central South Dakota going out July 29th through August 4th. The big caveat I want to bring up with the heat temperature, or the temperature forecast, and this is specific temperature forecast now, is the amount of smoke we have over the area, right? If we look outside, every day has been hazy. There's a ton of smoke coming off the Bootleg Fire in Southern Oregon, off the Tamarack Fire in California, off the Dixie Fire, off of the Beckworth Complex. There's some fires up in northeastern Washington that are producing smoke, and all that smoke is rotating around that upper level ridge and is piling at the mid levels over South Dakota. And so it's really filtering the sunlight. The past few days, we should have been seeing temperatures from 95 to 100. But it's really been from 92 to 95 because the smoke is kind of taking the edge off the sunshine. And I think that's something that we're going to have to deal with over the next, 2 to 4 weeks, potentially throughout the rest of August, with the situations that we're seeing out in NOROPS and the Pac Northwest and the Northern Rockies. So smoke is an issue. It's going to mitigate the temperatures a little bit, but everything is still showing high potential for excessive heat over the next 4 to 15 days, if you will. So our August outlook, and this was produced by the Climate Prediction Center back a week ago, we're still looking at good potential or good odds for above average temperatures as seen in the left figure, and pretty good odds, at least for the western part of the state, of below average precipitation throughout the month of August. So as Jason was saying, I think our opportunity for late July big fires and our opportunity for big fires in August is increasing by the day. Most of the folks that we talk to out here, and you all probably know it, if we start stacking up 1, 2, 3, 4 days of 98 to 100 degrees back to back to back, we dramatically increase the opportunity for big wildfires statewide. And so that's definitely a concern that we're looking at. And Jason, I'm glad you brought up the Jasper fire. The Jasper fire, occurred in late August in 2000. But it was a relatively wet spring that year, and it was kind of a short period of really hot and dry conditions that preceded the Jasper fire, conditions that we're going to see over the next 2 weeks. I'm not saying we're going to get a Jasper type fire in the hills, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility with the type of temperatures that we are expecting to move in. So to summarize, the drought is worsening across most areas of South Dakota. The forecast is for limited precipitation, but some extreme heat. That'll exacerbate the drought conditions, at least in the short term. Going out towards August, I think we're going to be in a real tough place. The Black Hills are currently doing okay with green herbaceous fuels. ERCs are right around average, but again, with the incoming heat, I do expect the fuel moistures to drop and the ERC values to climb. The South Dakota prairies are still feeling the full effect of the drought situation. And I think John hit the nail on the head when he talked about high levels of concern for the Missouri River breaks, going all the way from north central South Dakota through Cheyenne River Reservation down into the Yankton country as well. And so southeastern South Dakota, I've got a lot of concerns about those areas. Granted, they've had a little bit of recent moisture, but I think all of your big fuels are still incredibly dry. The last thing we got to consider is the influences of the southwest monsoon right now and the impact that it may have on lightning production across South Dakota. So that is all I have. I'd be happy to open up the floor to questions or comments. I see folks from kind of all over the state. If you have a little bit of additional input on your particular neck of the woods, feel free to share that now in terms of fuels or fire condition. I'd be happy to flip the mic over to you. Any questions? Any questions? And I don't see Eric Allen on yet, so we must have totally lost him. That's unfortunate, as I think you bring some good insight from the Park Service, but anything else? Any comments or questions? All right, well, I will wrap this up, but I do plan on having another one of these sometime, maybe in the second week in August to discuss the rest of the August fire potential. And of course, I'll be disseminating information, at least on a weekly basis, if not on a day-to-day basis, as needed as we approach more critical fire weather conditions going through the next couple of weeks. So you guys have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there. And I appreciate all of your input and all of your help on putting these presentations together. Take care.